So as you all know, Planet Under Pressure has developed 9 policy briefs to feed into the Rio process, and they've been outside in the lobby for everyone to pick up and digest. I'm going to call up now one of the authors of one of those briefings, Frank Biermann, professor from VU University in Amsterdam, and Lydia's going to come up too. And I'm going to quiz you now on how you turn the declaration. Please sit down. Make yourselves comfortable. How are you going to turn the declaration into something concrete, into actions, really? And I'm going to put some questions to you that have been coming in from the audience and which I've been digesting. The first one has only just come in, so let me see if I can pull it up for you. It's from Steve Everton, and he sent it in on Twitter, and he asks what scale of change is needed to transform the global economy so that it shifts to the green economic paradigm. How big is this, Lydia?
I would say that you will have probably some of the changes will be absolutely radical, principally when you think about new investments and really moving towards a more clean technologies and production processes. Also, in many ways, radical on the consumption partners, if we really want to act now and act quick enough to stop some of the major changes that are putting us at risk. And there are others that probably will take some time and will be stepwise, because there are also a lot for us to learn. And as we've been saying throughout the conference, the fact that we are so interconnected, it's a risk, but it's also a potential to create synergies that can accelerate some changes that we are probably not aware now.
So let's just follow up on that, Lydia. Another question that came in on Twitter today was saying, if you were flooded with money, came down manna from heaven, what would you do with it all of a sudden? And Anthony Walker from the University of Sheffield takes that idea on further and says that, to poor effect, the atom bomb was developed from concept to, unfortunately, bombing Hiroshima in just 2 years with tragic effect. What can you do in just 2 years if you want to create something very powerful to productive effect? Where would you put that money? Lydia, and I'm going to ask you too, Frank.
I'm probably going to be very selfish and say in science, and integrated science.
That's not good enough. Give me which project would you back?
No, clearly one of the issues that again has come out strongly, and we will need all the sciences and all the stakeholders in society to participate, is really the definition of these goals towards sustainable, global sustainable development or global sustainability, and how to define the right indicators that indeed will allow us to integrate the different pillars of sustainability, and how to define the targets, and by doing that in an interactive process, really creating the capacity in all nations to be able to follow that and to really understand what is in stake and what are the paths. And I think it was Professor Tibiana yesterday that said, we talk about this, but we need paths. And I would put all that money to bring the scientific community together with the communities, with the rest of society, to really develop very quickly ways forward in sustainable development.
Frank, can I pin you down on a project that you would back?
I can fully support this. I think what we need now in the Anthropocene is a new way of thinking and also new lifestyles. I think this is very important that we get this change. And I think science is very important, but at the same time also education. So if you don't have it, you had a lot of money, I think I would put all this money into education. I think that's very important, primary education as such, but also sustainability education. Education for our children in a way that they can better cope with these challenges and they can better understand what is ahead and how we can respond to this.
But so far we've had a lot of don't do this, don't do that, change your ways, doom and gloom. We've had questions coming in, a lot of questions on the paradigm shift that we all recognize needs to happen. For instance, Dr. Robin Russell-Jones from the international conference organizer HRTP asks, how do you offer people hope so that you don't focus too much on doomsday scenarios? Fitz has sent us a question saying, how do we shift the obsession from consumption to an obsession with equality, picking up on the point that Richard Wilkinson made. So how do you do that? How do you change the way we think, but in a positive way?
Well, the question of hope is, of course, a difficult. It's quite often asked at these kind of meetings. I think one thing that gives me hope already is just this conference. I think if we would not have any hope anymore, we would not have come to this conference. So just the fact that so many people, it's one of the biggest conferences in the last 5 years, so many people are working on these issues, I think this is one cause of hope. But also the participation of civil society movement in all of these issues. Many people have talked about the Copenhagen conference on climate as being a failure, which it was maybe in political terms, but the large amount of civil society, of young people who were there fighting for climate governance, trying to improve things. I think this is one reason that might give us hope. And also one has to say, I mean, many things go wrong in global environmental governance, for example, but some things also we managed to get right. Like the ozone hole was mentioned, this is one of the issues, which was one of the planetary boundaries which we almost missed, but we managed as humankind in a way to deal with this problem. Maybe a little bit late, but at least there are some issues that we could address and that worked out. And these are things that give me hope to continue further in working on these issues.
If I can add something there, I think we are also living in a moment of opportunity. The fact that
a moment of opportunity.
Of opportunity for change. Because again, if we are here, if we have all these many people really participating online to be part of this dialogue, it means that we are also ready to act. And this is what we are, I think it's coming out, is that it's now, it's urgent, and it has to be built up. So the hope is there, solutions are coming up, and what I think is precisely this interactive dialogue, this different dialogue, and probably something that we have missed through the governance in the different levels, is that how to connect the subnational to national to regional to global and vice versa. How do positions, attitudes, changings in the subnational are influencing policies at the upper level, and how major international agreements really are implemented at the local level, bringing therefore that
So let's unpack
dialogue.
that a bit more. Mark from the University of Reading is asking, how can we empower people in Africa or in Asia or wherever to create solutions for themselves?
I think there are several mechanisms that have to be done and used at the same time. And one clearly, Frank mentioned education. We need quality education for all, and we stress quality education. It's not just education, it's quality education. And it's also citizenship education, being part of a larger world. You are here, you have a community, you have something to protect, but whatever you do here affects others, and whatever they do affects you. And this shared responsibility, this part of belonging to something bigger, I think is something that has to be continuously stressed. I also believe that we need, again, to create this interface between the different levels of decision-making. And therefore, these platforms that Sibylle was just mentioning, we have to find new mechanisms of bringing the local voices, and Bina yesterday was very strong on that. How do we need to come and look at local solutions and bring that experience to others and connecting them, and that gives hope, because if you can do, maybe I can do too. And I think this is another mechanism that we have to do.
I just want to bring Frank in a minute, Lidia.
Sure.
What about institutions at the highest level? That's what your policy brief was about. We've got a question from Stefan Bauer from the German Development Institute, and he says that talking about the governance 2.0 debates that we've been having over the last few days, obviously they're very valid, but how do you actually peacefully update anachronistic post-war UN structures?
Well, it's funny. I mean, Twitter is kind of a small world. I know Stefan Bauer, I read some of his work, so I know that he's a renowned scholar of global environmental governance, and I give a specific answer also to this community working global environmental governance. I mean, one of the recommendations that came up from our work is that we have to change the way how we conduct international politics in the current system. We have to change the way. We can't continue in the system that we inherited from the 20th century for the problems of the Anthropocene in the 21st century. And one concrete proposal that came out from our community that's supported by the Earth System Governance Project is to rely stronger on majority voting in international negotiations. 78% of all multilateral environmental treaties are based on consensus voting. Only very few adopt majority voting. For example, the International Whaling Commission is based on majority voting. I'm very sure if they would have based on consensus voting, there would be no whale in the water anymore. So therefore, we propose to rely stronger on majority voting, on qualified majority voting. That's very important, because one of the...
That's a big ask, though.
Absolutely.
I mean, you know,
we are up for a big challenge.
I'm tempted to say dream on. Is this realistic?
Well, as Aaron Young yesterday said, we live and we are faced with the Anthropocene governance gap. So we need a constitutional moment, something like we had in the 1940s, when decision makers were really creating new institutions, new thinking to fix the problems they had at that time, which was war and depression. And now we are faced with the problems of the Anthropocene. We have to change our thinking. And this is a fundamental way to new thinking for the scientific community, but also for the policy community. So one of our advices or recommendations for Rio and for the years thereafter is start with majority vote, with qualified majority voting that increases the speed. We get better treaties quicker, but also think about new ways maybe of weighting the votes. Right now in the UN General Assembly, China and India have 1% of the votes together. And this is a system that is maybe not able to really generate belief of the larger countries to accept decisions that come out from a purely one country, one vote system. So we believe it's important to start thinking about weighted voting mechanisms in international organizations. We have some proposals for this. We don't have complete solutions, but we believe
you want to give the
important.
G20 more weight, don't you?
G20 is one model we have right now, which is a group of the 20 largest economies from north and from south. But maybe there are also other ways. The G20 is still based on GDP to some extent. Maybe it's better to base it also on population levels purely. But certainly a system where China has the same vote as Liechtenstein, Andorra, Monaco, and other small countries will not be effective in the long run.
It's gone down very well with the conference. What can I say? I was about to say, hand on heart, do you really think this is going to happen, though?
We are scientists. So what we believe to do is we have to develop new visions. We have to develop new ideas. I mean, this is very fundamental. I don't believe that in the 80 days that we have before the Rio conference that these changes will come. But I believe they're realistic. This is what Sir Giddens mentioned on Monday, realistic utopianism or utopian realism. This is what we have to work as in the scientific community. Because the short-term ideas, this is what foreign offices, what the United Nations Secretariat come up with themselves. We are here for the long-term visions, the constitutional ideas for global environmental governance. And this is what we're here
It's a big idea, that's for sure.
Can I just add a very...
Please, Lydia.
Short realism there. You know, it's great to have these great visions because you have to know how to move. And this was one of the issues we had in the beginning of the conference. And the challenge now is how to build that towards that vision. And this is why these issues that came about, mechanisms, different layers, multi-stakeholder platforms, this is when you, in a way, can almost reflect that, even if at the final moment you don't have what Frank is pushing forward. But can we make a process, develop the process of participation from the different levels and multi-stakeholder, that in a way, the voices that go to the final decision are really reflecting the voices
yes.
of
And how do you
all of
do
us.
that? That kind of reflects a comment that's come in on Twitter from Research Europe, saying everyone says we need to, we have to, we must, but how are we going to do it? Does anyone have a clue? That's the challenge that you all face, isn't it?
I think Sibylle just mentioned some ideas, and we do have existing platforms. I think they have to be improved. I think they have to bring other drivers into the platform, because I think really the biggest challenge the scientific community has is to, in a timely manner and in a very concrete way, pass the new knowledge to decision makers.
Okay, this is a very concrete question then, if that's what it's about. And it's from Paul Pierce Kelly from the Zoological Society of London, who has been following me around the conference in the last few days to make sure that I put this question to you. And it is this: is this conference going to state a safe level in terms of the carbon boundary? This is a science conference, after all. 350 parts per million. You know, pin your colors to the mast, he's saying.
In effect, this conference has already done so. Look at our policy briefings. They are all about that. And if you saw the results of the Global Sustainability Panel, the report they put forward, our scientists really work closely with the panel to really help them to develop that and to bring the scientific voice into the, and Frank, you were involved in some of those interactions. So yes, it's there, it's going to continue to be there, and Frank can explain to you how we really already did that and will continue to do so.
Excellent. Thank you very much for getting us going on the path of turning the declaration, the manifesto, if you like, into action. Frank Biermann and Lidia, thank you so very much.